Russians had designed for their T-54 tank. The idea of that sort of elliptical shape is it's very good for deflecting rounds, and it thickens the armour again with that angle it's got there. The problem is inside for the crew it's abysmal. But again, you're in a dictatorship. Don't forget, Stalin kills more Russians than Hitler ever does. No argument. The Russian tank crews, 5'8", maximum height for a tank crew, still true to this day. And again, so that you put up with that space in there. It could carry about 28 rounds. Normally 20 rounds would be high explosive. And we mentioned before, tanks aren't always designed for fighting against other tanks. In fact, lots of tanks always carry more high explosive than armour piercing. Because they're supporting infantry, they're rarely taking out another armoured target. So 20 rounds would be carried of HE, only 8 rounds of armour piercing. Now the IS-3 sees some action. It's used in Hungary, the Prague Spring of 1968, Hungary 56. 100 of them are actually also sold to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians in the Middle East, they had mixed success with them. Many of them were used in static positions where the firepower was impressive, but they didn't actually end up using them in a very mobile manner. Now that IS-3 has come over from the Brussels military collection, the Royal Military Collection of Brussels. It mainly lives most of its life down in Bastogne, so we're very thankful to get that tank across here to be shown off here at the TankFest. Now the Russians, after the Second World War, they just as the war ends, the T-54 tank, again using that frying pan shaped turret. What we're actually looking at was the tank driving around behind the IS-3. It's a Chinese copy of a Type 54 tank. The Soviets at the end of the 50s give the Chinese Communist government their plans for their tanks. And the Chinese make it. Norinco, the Chinese tank manufacturer, makes these tanks out in 57 to 1960. They made Type 59 tanks, the copy of the T-54. And what we're looking at there is one of these Chinese copies. Slightly weirdly, it's got a British gun on. As Royal Ordnance touted the famous L7 105mm gun as an upgrade project to countries that have bought the Type 59. And this is their test-bed tank that they gave to us some years later. Now the T-54, what it's built on, 50,000 T-54s and T-55s were built, along with that T-59. A massive number there. And you can tell it's a Type 54 or Type 59 because of the uneven spread of the road wheels. There's a gap in them. Good indicator there. 100mm DT-10 gun on it. Very simple fire control system it had, only 34 rounds carried, but in use, reliable, very simple, huge numbers made and exported and sold on all around the world. The Chinese copies were sold into the Middle East, and we've got a number that were captured in the first Gulf War off the Iraqi army. Now it's followed by the T-72 tank, a lot more sinister looking vehicle. Now if you compare them, it's a lot lower, that turret, and how they managed to do that, they got rid of the loader. The whole issue is, when you've got a big tank round, you almost need to stand up to load it in the breech of the gun, even two-part ammunition. Ammunition that has a round to go in first, followed by a bag charge or a case full of explosives to blast it out. What the Russians do with the T-72, they're copying from the T-64, a tank they didn't build in large numbers, very sophisticated tank, too expensive, too complex, the T-64, so they quit to a rival manufacturer in Russia, and it's funny to hear that even under a command economy there's rivalries between the different manufacturers. They come up with a simplified version, and that's the T-72. What we're looking at there, it has a carousel system, so think of the old slide projector. Instead of slides in it, it's got a round in it, and that's below the turret ring. That goes around, the gun goes level, and an auto loader rams the shell in the breech, then rams in the charge behind it, and then it can fire off. So what we're looking at there is The T-72, very low profile without that loader in it. And again, this particular one, a T-72M, it's the export version. A number of these were sold on all around the world, again into the Middle East. Many countries are still using the T-72. So this T-72 goes up to Salisbury Plain on a regular basis as part of training exercises, and it takes part as part of the op force against the British Army. 125mm, the gun is actually stabilised on there as well, and in the back there's a 740 horsepower diesel engine, and you can see also on the back where they'd add sometimes 200 litre fuel drums. Now that whopping tank that's driving around as well in front of you, one of the Cold War answers to the Soviet IS-3 tank. What happened in America and in Britain, we had nervousness that our in-service tank at the end of the 1940s, early 50s, wasn't going to be good enough or powerful enough to take on the IS-3. So in Britain, we built the Conqueror tank. And the whole idea, it was supposed to complement the Centurion tank that it fought with. The Conqueror had a 120mm gun, just like here we're looking at the 120mm gun that's on the American M103 tank. Again, the idea being that the M47, M48 tanks, they've got a lower caliber gun on them. Could they take on an IS-3 with that thick armour? So they decided to build a tank that would have an overwatch role. And this M103 was there to do that. What happens, of course, is very quickly the British designed the L7 105mm gun. And that means that that Conqueror tank and this M103 become redundant, because the L7 has such superb penetration, it could take on any Russian tank, so we don't need these super heavy beasts like the M103. The American military, they handed over about 156 of these to the American Marines, which was slightly surprising, thinking the Marines are going to be quite often coming off a landing craft. Are they going to actually be able to land a vehicle that big and that heavy? It had 2 loaders in the M103, because again the ammunition is now in 2 parts, and they didn't see much service life. And our version there actually comes from the American Marines. Now the M60, that followed the M48 tank. Basically the Americans designed the pattern tank after World War II, and the series M47, M48, M60s, they're almost the same tank growing. What the M60 is it's like an M47 on steroids, gets bigger, thicker armour, bigger turret, and by now they've got available to them that British L7 105mm gun. And the whole issue about the L7, why everyone goes on about